Welcome and thank you so much for joining us here this morning. I know that you all have very busy days and it's critical that we hear what's going on in these areas. My name is Suzi Levine, as John mentioned, and I got interested in the Institute for Learning and Brain Sciences at the University of Washington when my kids were toddlers in order to be a better parent. But I got involved in order to be a better citizen. You see, I realized that my kids live in the world, and in order for them to have a better world, we need to ameliorate the achievement gap. But I also recognize that one of the key ways in which we do that is by providing high-quality early learning for all kids. Now, ordinarily when people talk about early learning, they're talking about programs, Head Start, Early Head Start, Mother-Child Home Visitation. And today we have the honor and opportunity of looking further upstream in the early learning ecosystem at the science of early learning. Now, one of the things that's key about learning about the science is that we can then understand how we can provide evidence to support why we're doing it, and we can look at excellence for how we do it. Understanding the mechanisms by which the brain works for these young people allows us to create programs and policies that are much more effective and much more efficient. So you all are here today not as bystanders, but as individuals who day in and day out change the world with what you do. So I hope as you're listening to our three scientists that you take what you hear and you translate it to the work that you do. And if you have questions or if you wonder, gosh, why is that happening, or is there a way to do that better? Please look to the science. And when you hear research says or studies show, feel free to reach out to us or to Lori's office and ask us, do we know more? Is there more information to support that? Because that's why we're here today. So let me introduce the scientists from which you'll hear. First off, you'll get to hear from Dr. Patricia Kuhl. She is the co-director of iLabs and holds the Bezos Family Foundation Endowed Chair in Early Childhood Learning. Dr. Kuhl is the principal investigator on a large interdisciplinary National Science Foundation Science of Learning Center grant about how people learn, and also holds grants from the National Institute of Child Health and Human Development. Pat is internationally recognized for her research on early learning, early language and brain development, and her work has played a major role in demonstrating how early exposure to language alters the brain, which has implications for bilingual education and reading readiness. After that, you'll hear from Dr. Andrew Meltzoff, the other iLabs co-director. He holds the Job and Gertrude Tamaki Endowed Chair at the University of Washington and is co-PI on the NSF Science of Learning Center grant and a Merit Award winner for a research grant from the National Institute of Child Health and Human Development. Andy is an internationally renowned expert on infant and child development. His discoveries about infant imitation have revolutionized our understanding of early cognition, personality, and brain development. His research on social-emotional development and children's understanding of other people has helped shape theory, policy, and practice. Dr. Meltzoff's scientific work has taught us that human infants are literally born learning. Together, Drs. Kuhl and Meltzoff have pioneered techniques to use an MEG, which you'll hear about shortly, almost like a Hubble telescope for young brains. I liken the images that you'll see today to that of previously unseen galaxies. After that, you'll have the opportunity to hear from Dr. Lori Brotman, the Prevention Science Professor of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry and Population Health at NYU's Langone Medical Center and Director of the Institute for Prevention Science at NYU Child Study Center. For 20 years, Dr. Brotman has been developing and evaluating programs for low-income children and their families. She is the principal investigator on grants from the National Institute of Mental Health and the Institute of Educational Sciences of the U.S. Department of Education. Dr. Brotman has served on the boards of director of the Society for Prevention Research, and in 2009, she was honored with the Society's Community, Culture, and Prevention Science Award. Dr. Brotman is the developer of ParentCore, a culturally informed, family-centered, school-based intervention for low-income preschoolers and their families. ParentCore is included in the National Registry of Evidence-Based Programs and Practices, and today, Dr. Brotman will be sharing findings from a study of ParentCore with over 1,000 low-income pre-K students in New York City and innovative efforts in New York State to eliminate the achievement gap and health disparities for poor minority children. So without further ado, Dr. Kuhl.
Thank you for that kind introduction, and to all the sponsors and co-sponsors, and particularly to Representative Fatah and Jim McDermott. So let's see if we can get our PowerPoint back here. There we go. Okay. So I am very excited to be here today and share with you some of the newest brain research that we're discovering about children. We've been funded, as was mentioned, by the National Science Foundation Science of Learning program and by NICHD in the NIH. I was at the 1997 conference that Representative Fatah mentioned that Hillary Clinton ran in the White House and spoke about the amazing abilities of young children to learn in ways that we had not imagined before. What we didn't have in 1997 and what we do have today due to the generous funding by federal government and foundations is that we can actually get under the hood and look at the baby brain and see images of learning. We can measure various aspects of the brain and understand more about the magic they put to work when they learn. Something we've known for some time is the fact that brain growth is tremendous in the early period. As you see from this slide, by the time we send our children to school at 5, the volumes of their brain are 92% complete. The first year goes from 25% to 70%. So there's an amazing amount taking place in the brain as these children are transgressing between 0 and 5 years. Most of what is going on, you can see in the synapses. We begin life with trillions of nerve cells, gray matter in the brain, but what's missing are the connections between them. And as you see by the age of 6, many of those telephone wires have been connected that allow the cells to communicate with one another. Between the age of 6 and puberty, there's a pruning going on. You prune nerve cells for the same reason that you prune a rose bush, and that is to make the remaining connections stronger. But now we're able to see how these kinds of developmental changes turn into changes in the ability to learn. So biologists described a long time ago that there are critical periods or windows of opportunity in learning. And one of the most recognized ones, and the one that's been studied the most, has to do with the critical period for language. If you look at this graph and find your age at the bottom, and then look at your skill set on the vertical axis, you'll see that the children between 0 and 7 are geniuses at acquiring a second language, but that at each 2-year interval between the age of 7 and puberty, there's a decline. And after the age of, 17 to 39, you can see that we kind of fall off the map. So the children are putting something to work that we can't, and we're trying to understand what that is, because it's very, very important for the acquisition of language and for reading what they do in the early period. It's also the time when developmental disabilities take hold that involve social function and language. The autism spectrum disorder, specific language impairment, Fragile X, these are all disorders that affect language. Knowing what children are doing to acquire language will help us help the children with more clever interventions. So one of the things we've been looking at is the earliest windows of opportunity in this curve, what children are doing in the beginning that we have trouble with. Children are mastering the sounds to acquire words. Each language uses a different set of sounds. And early in development, kids very early in their first year are paying attention to the sounds of language. And I want to show you a test that we've been using all over the world with the sounds of many languages to see how infants are doing something that we can't do. This is a little one who's sitting on her mother's lap, and to her right, there's an adult playing with a box of toys, and the toys are keeping the child's attention. On the left is a loudspeaker creating a sound and a black box on top of it. What the child's job is to do is to listen when the sound changes from ah to e, to turn their heads to the left. They've got 3 seconds to turn their heads and see something very interesting happen in the black box. Let's see how this little one is doing.
Can a baby as young as 6 months old hear the difference between 2 vowels? This baby is trained to look for the toy when the sound changes. She's being distracted, so she'll turn only when she hears the difference in sounds. The key question, will she turn before the toy lights up?
E, 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 E.
Okay, she's a genius at this task, right? Okay, what she's doing is something that is universal across the children of the world, no matter what country you're in and what language you're testing. Infants at this age, she's a 6-monther, can detect the differences between all the sounds used in all languages of the world. You and I, everyone sitting in this room, can only do that for the sounds that, for the languages that you've been exposed to. So if it's English or if it's other languages, only for those languages. The children are citizens of the world in the early period, and we're more culture-bound listeners. So when does this learning change? When do these children become more like us? If you look at these data taken from a study done in Tokyo and Seattle, and we're using as the test sounds ra and la, important to English and not to Japanese, what you see is a very dramatic change that happens between 8 months and 10 months. At 6 to 8 months, the children in both countries are equally good, 65% at turning their heads and recognizing that difference between ra and la. 2 months later, the American babies have gotten a lot better, and the Japanese babies have gotten a lot worse. Both are preparing exactly as they should for the languages they're going to acquire. So within this 2-month period, something very important is happening to their brains that's not happening to ours. If we go to Japan or we go to Russia, that absorption of the sounds and understanding which ones are critical does not happen. So what are the kids putting to work that we can't put to work anymore? The two factors that are occurring during these 2 months, both of which are amazing, are quite different. The first one is computational. Babies are sensitive to the frequency with which sounds occur. They don't understand the words at 6 months. They seem to be sensitive to a count of the number of sounds that occur. And their brains are sensitive to the highest count of the sounds in the language. So American kids are hearing lots of R's and L's, and Japanese kids are hearing something in between, but not distinct R's and L's, and their brains are being shaped by that experience. So there's a computational event going on. But more importantly, a recent discovery showed that the social brain turns that computational ability on. And I'll show you how we know that that's true. We ran an experiment in which we exposed babies in America to either Mandarin or Spanish for the first time in their lives at 9 months. 12 sessions playing on the floor with the graduate students and postdoc who spoke that foreign language with them. And we tested how did that affect their brains. So here is a video of what those sessions looked like in the laboratory.
Jasper, 早安 Finn。嗨，我们要来讲一个故事哦。今天要讲的故事是《小熊七七探险记》。来看看发生了什么事情哦。小熊七七在这里。好，有一天啊，小熊七七说
Okay,
一个
watch the
绿
babies.
色的圈圈，绿色的圈圈，绿色的圈圈，转一下，转一圈，嘿，一圈，再一次哦，转1、2、3，两个圈，再一个1、2、3。
Okay, I hope your Mandarin skills are coming along now as you're being exposed like babies. So what we discovered in this experiment is that 12 sessions of the babies hearing Mandarin made them equivalent to the children growing up in Taiwan who'd been listening for 10 months. When the brain is ready for information during this sensitive period, the exposure to that foreign language allows them to absorb not only the sounds of the language, but the words, and do so with incredible efficiency. And this ability to learn during this 2-month period, the skill that infants show in these head-turn tests or in brain measures predict their language skills at the age of 3, predict their reading readiness at the age of 5. So these measures of children's ability to learn socially and computationally are very, very sensitive to general learning. We wondered when we saw this experiment what the human being had to do with it. The children were in love with the sessions. You could see that they were tracking them and very eager. We can see that their skills were fantastic. But we ran the following condition. Let's take the human being out of the equation. Let's present the same material over beautiful DVDs on the same dosage at the same time in development and see what that does to their little brains. And also present another group of 32 babies with audio tape presentations and watching just a teddy bear on the screen. What we demonstrated that there was no learning whatsoever in the TV condition or in the audio tape condition, even though the kids stared at the screen and looked for all the world as though they were learning. Brain tests afterwards showed that they were equivalent to the kids who'd been exposed to English in the control group. And so the only effective learning was face-to-face social interaction, natural language learning. So these computational skills that have been demonstrated for babies that not only work for audition and vision, it looks as though it takes a human being and social interaction in the early period to learn. So what's going on in their brains as the social brain interacts with the computational skills to produce this enormous learning? Okay, so now we come to what's absolutely the newest data that we have. We've been working on a toolbox for the developing brain. How do we measure? How do we get in and measure what's actually happening in the brain? We've combined tools, a team of 10 people hired from all over the university, physicists, biophysicists, radiologists, and neuroscientists, psychologists to work on the baby brain. For the first time, we can get under the hood and look. This is a 9-monther. We can actually measure the lobes, each of the 116 areas in the brain, and understand what the composition of that brain area is and relate that to the child's skills. This development of a brain model for babies, I want you to look at this slide. This is an example. On the left, you see our newest brain head model for 6-monthers, and on the right, the previous one. Look how clear the one on the left is. The difference is the one on the right combined all children under the age of 2. What we're doing is age-specific head templates, and you can see how sharp they are. We really, really know where in the brain various activities can take place because we have a brain model that averages 6-monther brains and averages 12-monther brains. They change so rapidly. Baby brains are not just shrunken versions of our own adult brain. They're very, very specific to that age and change very rapidly. But we can do more. We can get into those areas and measure the white and gray matter. Gray matter are the nerve cells. White matter is the connective tissue, the fiber tracts. Here's the difference between a 9-monther and a 5-monther is amazing. And of course, the adult brain even more elaborate with regard to its white matter development. Look at what we have discovered using whole brain analyses of 116 areas. We brought children in at 7 months to take these snapshots, these photographs of their brain, looked at the entire 116 area array, and then brought them back months later to say, which areas at 7 months predict language skills at a year? We were greatly surprised because the 2 areas that we identified were the cerebellum and the hippocampus. What do? The cerebellum gets motor programming ready. The hippocampus, memory systems. Babies are hearing and remembering what they have listened to, the talk that we're giving them. By 12 months, that talk becomes their first words. The cerebellum has to be ready to talk back. And these are the 2 areas that predict. These are extraordinarily high correlations, and they've been corrected for multiple comparisons. This is a stunning and surprising finding. Again, we can go beyond it now. We can now look at the fiber tracts, the white matter fiber tracts that allow brain areas to communicate with one another. Without these superhighways, nothing happens to coordinate activity in the brain. Here you see our little 9-monther with all the fiber tracts connecting right hemisphere to left hemisphere through the corpus callosum. The pink ones are the strongest ones, and if you look at the corpus callosum, you see one string that's sort of the strongest fiber tract between the right and left hemisphere. But look at 5. By the time we send our little ones to school, look at that brain. Very, very wired for the communication that has to transpire in the brain. And of course, much more elaborated in the adult brain. Okay, so we can go beyond these fiber tracts. We can specify a particular fiber tract that we're interested in. One of the fiber tracts we're interested in is that which connects listening to language and speech and speaking yourself. Wernicke's for listening, Broca's for talking, for grammar, for reading, and social interaction. There's the fiber tract, the arcuate, that connects those 2. That system has to be intact in the 5-year-old to send that child to school ready to read. and ready to exercise language skills at the best of our children's abilities. And you can see by 5, it's much more elaborate. In adults, more elaborate still, and we can point out by looking at these areas that damage to an adult, not to a 2-year-old, damage to a 2-year-old can be recovered from in an adult like Representative Gabrielle Giffords, where the bullet went through Broca's area. Makes it very, very difficult for Gabrielle Giffords to speak now, even though she can listen, because Broca's area was damaged. These fiber tracts are critical to development. We can now, for the first time, see them in babies. Now, what I've shown you so far is still static photographs. You know, the gray matter, white matter, the 116 areas, the fiber tracts, they're still photographs. We want to see the brain in action. To see the brain in action, we had to buy a $2.5 million new technology called magnetoencephalography. Looks like a hairdryer from Mars. It's perfectly safe, perfectly non-invasive. It allows the brain's activity, when millions of neurons fire together, what changes is the magnetic fields. And this device acts like a sensor, a stethoscope on the brain and we can pick up these magnetic fields through squids. These are superconducting quantum interference devices, 306 of them in that little hood, and they pick up with millimeter precision and millisecond accuracy where in the brain the activity is taking place. Now, we're the first in the world to put babies in an MEG machine because it's perfectly safe and noiseless for them to sit and listen or look or sense something, want to act on the world. They can move. They're not, they're not restricted because we're tracking their little heads with 4 pellets lightly on in a little cap on the head. So you can see this little 6-monther. She's listening to the sounds of different languages through insert earphones. We're going to compare this condition to one in which a person is in front of her talking. But you can see she's completely comfortable. And this is a technical tour de force because for the first time we can actually see what she's doing as she listens to the sounds of language. So in the next slide, I'm going to actually combine all these images. For the first time, again, a world first demonstration of a 3D event where we're combining MRI, so the structures of the brain, DTI that shows us the fiber tracts, and MEG that shows us the activity. What you'll see is the 116 color-coded areas, Broca's and Wernicke's, the fiber tract between them, and then you're going to see blue bubbles that represent the current flow in the brain as the baby listens to, the 12-monther, listens to an English word, and then another English word, and then a Spanish word. This baby has never been exposed to Spanish. What areas of the brain? We'll look at auditory and Broca's. Which ones are going to show us this developmental change at 12 months? Okay, here we go. This is our 12-monther, and her brain all parcellated into 116 areas. You'll see next 2 auditory areas critical for listening. Those 2 critical Broca's areas right there, and the arcuate that connects them. Now you'll see the blue bubbles, and look, where are they happening? Are they happening in auditory or Broca's or both? And you can see the blue bubbles are wildly active. The current flow is in both auditory and Broca. Now we'll see another English word, again, auditory and Broca lit up. So this baby's Broca's area, the area that's for talking, for reading, is active when this child at 12 months is listening to English. Let's test with Spanish. So what happens? What areas of the brain are activated? We see auditory activation that's equivalent, but much less activation in Broca's area, and that's very, very interesting. This baby is a 12-monther, a bilingual 12-monther, specialized already. This is learning in the brain. This is evidence of learning. This child has already selected and listening carefully to English in a way, the brain is reacting in a way to English that's not identical to Spanish. That's remarkable. A world first to understand which areas are contributing to this selection, this learning process that infants are following. So we're also doing studies on bilingual children. In San Antonio, we've enrolled 55 families. These are families in a Head Start program, mostly teenage moms. You see here a wonderful 19-year-old mother who is holding her 4th child. She's a wonderful young woman who knows nothing about brain development. And our experiment there with sociologist Harriet Romo was to look at 2 aspects. The baby, how are the babies contending with 2 languages, and what do their brains look like? How are these mothers understanding, or what's their understanding of the baby's capacity to learn? And 2 important outcomes are, number 1, Bilingual children in that period, we followed them from 6 months to first grade where they are now. As long as they're input from both languages, they're hearing Spanish and English at the same time during their days regularly, their brains are doing fine. They're acquiring words on schedule in both of their languages. They're more flexible from the standpoint of cognitive flexibility. They have better executive function. They are doing beautifully. The mothers are learning and absorbing information about their role in developing that child's brain. That itself is a finding of the study, how receptive these young women are to understanding that the exhausting role of parenting is actually building a brain, that those mothers are providing the brain food that the children, their own children, need to grow the kinds of architecture in the brain that they need to succeed in school and in life. Now, we all know in this room that opportunities for learning are not equal across our country and indeed across the world. When you try to predict at the age of 5 what makes Broca's area function in the way that we want it to, that we need to have it function for language and literacy, you'll see Broca's area on the right, and that's what we've focused on in the color. That's Broca's. And on the left, you see the findings of a study in which we took many, many measurements, both in the home and of the children, to see what of those measurements predicted Broca's function at the age of 5. What the study demonstrated was that the socioeconomic status of the child's family, and we take that, many take that, as a proxy for opportunities to learn. And we could demonstrate in this study, SES correlated strongly with the opportunities to learn, the books in the home, the amount of reading, the conversations that happened at dinner, how complex the vocabulary was, how complex the grammar was. This is what predicted Broca's function, not the children's individual skills, but their home environments, their opportunities to learn. Children need opportunities to learn. Their brains don't develop in the way that they would had they been given opportunities to learn. This is not a level playing field. This is not fair to the children. This is something that we need to take into account. One more slide about data. What you can expect in the future from brain science is biomarkers that help us detect very, very early developmental disabilities. What you see here is the results of a study in which we measured event-related potentials at time 1 when children with autism spectrum disorder were 2 years old. Then we brought them back at the age of 4 and the age of 6. What we show is this brain measure of word processing at 2 years of age predicts cognition, it predicts adaptive behavior, and it predicts receptive language at the age of 6 in a phenomenal way, better than any other measure that we know. So brain science would like to take it down earlier, not just at 2. We'd love to have a measure like this at 6 months, and we're working on it. That would allow us to change children's and families' lives by detecting early and inventing, because we've got the brain science to see which areas are not performing, better interventions than now exist. My final slide is this one. We travel all over the world and see how other countries are dealing with brain science and the science of learning of children. This is Hong Kong, Saturday morning at 10 a.m. Infants, Toddlers, and Twos is the name of the school. What's unusual about this picture? The dads. This school requires every father who's in town on that Saturday to show up at the school in order to get into the school. The dads have to come on Saturdays at 10 a.m. or their children will not be allowed to be in the school. And this school is a fabulous school where the kids play, parents and children play. They do science, they do art, they do math, they do music, they have a gym. It is the most fantastic school I've ever seen, and the participation between the children and their parents is wonderful. But this shows, I think, that countries are aware, some countries more aware than we are, about children's brains, their potential, and what one ought to do about it. Thank you, and I'll turn it over to Andy.
So I want to extend the dialogue here to talk about social and emotional learning and talk about some of the learning that takes place that you can observe in behavior that's undergirded by the brain development that Pat talked about. Children are clearly learning from us very early on. They implicitly learn from the actions they see us do. And in that sense, we begin teaching children not just in elementary school or in kindergarten, but actually before they learn to talk. And I want to discuss today some of the special mechanisms of learning that occur during the infant period. Infants, of course, absorb simple things like the behaviors they see us do. Older children in elementary school, which I'll also discuss, are observing and absorbing our values, our ethics, our ways of interaction with others, and even the stereotypes that pervade culture. And I want to talk a little bit about how stereotypes are affecting our elementary school children a little later in my remarks today. But the thread through all of this is that people matter to children, and babies and young infants are learning from people best. I want to illustrate that in a variety of ways. One of the ways I want to illustrate this in a very powerful learning mechanism for young babies is observing what we do and imitating it, copying the behaviors they see. I have a short videotape that was made by when Alan Alda came to my laboratory to film a show for Scientific American Frontiers. The other scientists in the room know about this. There are film crews that come in and want to film the research we're doing. I was doing research on imitation. And this is a little child with 4 languages to show how quickly they learn and absorb information. So Alan Alda just put beads in a cup without any verbal instruction. The child did the right thing and was quite happy at her performance. And then I took a cup from REI Camping Company and I did something strange. I turned it over and squashed it. She looked at the cup, looked at the person and at the cup, and turns it over and did the same thing. Then I gave Alan Alda a special toy we built that you pull apart, put back together. Watch the child's eyes. Down at the object, up at the human being, down at the object. Good pop. Then I asked the movie star to do a strange and unusual action that this child certainly would not have seen. Touch this with his head. Do you want to turn? Boom. And she does the same thing. When in Seattle, do as the Seattle people do. Children are learning and absorbing information like a sponge, undergirded by the neuroscience we saw. These are things that parents see, daycare providers see. It's very inspiring for parents to see in simple laboratory experiments how much the children are watching and learning from us. But children don't just begin imitating when they're toddlers, of course. They're born learning. And scientists are very interested in documenting in a scientific way that children are born learning. In our laboratory, we went into the newborn nursery and did an experiment, 2 papers that we published on newborn children where the average age was 36 hours old. The youngest child that we tested was 42 minutes old. And this is a picture of a 19-hour-old sitting up, wrapped in the hospital garb, looking at a human face. Then the human being, in order to test imitation in these very young children, does facial expressions. The adult sticks out his tongue, and the little 19-hour-old eyes converge on this strange biological motion, and then she responds with a tongue protrusion of her own. Then when we switch to mouth opening, her eyes converge again, and she does a mouth opening in response. And the amazing thing about this is while children may look up and see your face, they cannot look down and see their own face. At this age, they have never seen their face in a mirror. There are no mirrors in the womb. So the fascinating neuroscience question, psychological question is, how can a human being connect self and other literally at birth without prior visual experience? We are born social. We are born learning. We are born connected to other people and can see that in infancy. And this is one of the sort of privileges of being a scientist, where you can answer age-old questions, where there have been debates between political thinkers and religious leaders about whether we're born as social isolates, separate from one another, and then socialized and brought together, or on the other side, philosophers who have thought about us being born connected. This research is indicating that we are born wired for culture, born ready to learn from other human beings. And it's a very, very powerful demonstration of that. Of course, we're interested in the neuroscience that underlies and is connected with imitation and all types of social learning. And in this very new research that's cited on the bottom, Peter Marshall from Temple University and I and other colleagues are doing research on what's called changes in mu rhythm, of changes in the baby's brain as they observe actions or reproduce actions themselves. And it's very exciting not only to look at the behavior of imitative learning, but now some of the neural correlates of imitation as well. I want to move on in the interest of time and say that it's important for child development not only that children imitate, but that they don't copy their peers and adults all the time. There are certain behaviors you're not supposed to do, even though you see others do that. So how do children regulate their imitation? It turns out that observing the emotional reaction in the world is one way that children control impulsivity and their tendency to want to duplicate. And this is shown in a study done by Dr. Betty Rapopoli and I at Institute for Learning and Brain Sciences, where we gave a tool, a simple stick, to a child or to an adult and had them press a button to make a sound. We know from control groups that the children wanted the tool to buzz the button, but we had an adult come in, a second adult, and get angry at the first adult as if it were a forbidden action in this culture. And I want to show you a baby's response to this. This is the baby watching.
See? Look at this. There.
Hi, Barrett. I'm going to sit here and read a magazine.
Okay, that's Nina. Nina's going to sit and read a magazine. Nina, look at this.
That's aggravating. That's so annoying.
Oh, I thought it was really interesting.
Well, that's just your opinion. It's aggravating.
So the little 18-month-old is sitting down there wide-eyed watching this interaction. Then we give her the toy, which we know she wants to use from previous studies. Now, we think this is actually an important measure of self-regulation in the preverbal period in 18-month-old infant, and we believe that the baby's ability to do this will predict executive function ability, and there's a large interest at NICHD and others in executive function. Betty Rapopoli and I are now studying, following up these children when they're 5 and 6, just entering school. We believe there's going to be prediction from this early period to a battery of fantastic executive function tasks that are being developed around the country, and we're very, very interested in it. Also, we want to do this in the MEG. Wouldn't it be wonderful to look at what parts of the brain are involved as the baby inhibits activity in this way? Again, in the interest of time, I want to move forward, skipping to cultural stereotypes in school. I talked about how children absorb information from the social world. But it isn't only behavior, as we saw in these videotapes, but the values and stereotypes that are pervasively in the culture that bathe the child. It's in the air, and children absorb it. We were very interested in the development of stereotypes and self-concepts of all kinds. There are stereotypes about race in school. There's stereotypes about social class in school and school academic subjects. There are also stereotypes about gender and particular academic subjects, and those are very readily studied, so we began with those. We were interested in particular about gender stereotypes about who does math. In American culture, it's just a stereotype, not a truth. A stereotype is that boys do math and girls don't. Because we were so interested in social learning and the babies being tuned into the social world, we began to think that that could affect young children, and we designed some tests to evaluate their sensitivity to these stereotypes early on. And we were able to discover something of a child development timeline about that. First, children develop a sense of gender identity. This is known from previous research. Something like I'm a girl or a boy is developed and acquired during infancy or preschool period. But what we discovered in our work with stereotypes is as early as second grade, in our tests, children exhibited a highly significant effect that girls don't do math. If you ask them essentially to sort items into 2 boxes or to 2 bins, one of them girl items and one boy items, and they will go reading girl, Math goes with boy. Graph, boy. Number, boy. So they have, by second grade, even before they've learned their multiplications table, have the social world sorted out stereotypically as the culture does. Then what we found is by third grade, the children internalize these stereotypes that are in the air and apply them to themselves. I'm a girl. Girls out there don't do math. Therefore, I don't do math, and we believe that leads them to close down aspirations about future careers, jobs, and visions about themselves in the future. Of course, many of us in society are interested in developing interventions and changing stereotypes where we can switch it from girls don't do math to girls do math. Therefore, I do math, and I open up my hopes and dreams and aspirations. It turns out that these stereotypes are not culturally universal. We're in Singapore now working with the National Institute of Education and are in the middle of data analysis. The results are very interesting. The math scores in Singapore clearly are significantly higher than in America, and we're getting some interesting inklings about the stereotypes in their country as well. Now I want to skip then to the last series of slides, which is to say at the Institute for Learning and Brain Sciences, we're interested in translating outreach and education, getting this information into the groundwater, which is this session today is helping with, we hope, and raising awareness among scientists, educators, policymakers, and society. We've done that in several ways. One is in this science paper, connecting the science of learning in 4 areas: what's happening in psychology, neuroscience, education, and machine learning and robotics, and arguing that the country will profit from a new science of learning that's highly interdisciplinary, and we tried to make that argument in this paper. There's been worldwide interest in what this session is here today about bridging from neuroscience to education, going through understanding developmental psychology and the behavior of children in the first 5 years of life. There's been interest in OECD, a conference that was sponsored by NSF, at NBC's Education Nation, where Pat and I spoke, tying together the early development in the first 3 and 5 years of life with what educators are doing, interest in the Aspen Ideas Festival about child learning, and even at the Vatican, there's a Pontifical Academy of Sciences, which is there are 17 Nobel Prize winners that are part of that, and they were interested very much in neuroplasticity, education, and child development. So we think that these breakthroughs in brain science and child development in the first 2,000 days of life are extremely important. They will be very helpful for changing society so we can help all our children reach their full potential. We really want to transform American culture, if we can, into a learning nation that is paying the attention that they ought to pay to the very, very important first 2,000 days of life. The babies can't wait for us to act, so I hope we do. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you very much. I'm going to just start by saying it is such a pleasure to come after Pat and Andy. And I have to say I appreciated the young woman comment earlier by the congressman, not so young. But I did certainly grow up on the work, the earlier work that Andy and Pat are sharing with you. And so I hope that you could see the connections in the intervention work that we're doing and the prevention science work that we're doing and the very careful and brilliant work of the iLab investigators. There is now compelling evidence that poverty and stress affect every aspect of a child's life. Fortunately, successful preventive interventions early in life can lead to enormous return on investment. For many years, my colleagues and I have been developing and testing programs for families of low-income children as they make the important transition to school. You heard about critical periods in infancy. Well, the preschool period is a critical time for children to develop the social, emotional, and behavioral skills that are necessary for school and life success. But the transition to school is also a critical period for parents, especially parents who have not graduated from high school or have grown up in other countries and aren't familiar with the public school system in America. So the transition to school provides a great opportunity to engage and support parents to help their children to succeed. We developed a program called Parent Corps to be engaging to ethnically diverse, low-income families and to be accessible by offering it to all families as part of the pre-K experience. So Parent Corps aims to support high-quality experiences at home as well as in the preschool environment for low-income children. This is our theory of change for Parent Corps, and as a scientist, as a prevention scientist, we like to have theories of change that are our explanation as to why a program might work, and then we go about testing it and to see if that's actually the case. So Parent Corps includes professional development for early childhood teachers and a 13-session after-school program for families. Parent Corps helps teachers and parents to support positive behavior and use effective behavior management. By helping teachers to welcome and engage families, and by basing the program at the school with teacher involvement, Parent Corps aims to increase parent involvement in education. Based on the science of early childhood development, our theory is that if we can improve the quality of both the home and preschool environment, we should see improvements in self-regulation and early learning in kindergarten that will impact lifelong health and development, including academic achievement. Thousands of parents and teachers of preschool students have participated in Parent Corps, and I'm now going to let you hear from a few of them.
We're not seeing anything on the screen. Seems like this is where the connection is lost. Let's do this. There we go. Got it. Okay. Got it. Thank
you. Before I learned about Parent Corps, I used to handle things a little rough, I would say. And just being in Parent Corps taught us how to react to our children in all ages.
When he crying, when it's time out crying, what am I supposed to do at this side? When he's crying, but he's still on time out.
What do you guys think? What do you do if your child's crying when they're in timeout? They want your attention. What do you guys do?
Ignoring him. That's the best thing to do. Caleb don't like timeout. He don't like to be ignored, and he don't like to sit still for a moment. So it works.
The two-choice statement works way better for me than timeout shit.
In Parent Corps, we're going over a lot of different strategies that, you can put in your toolkit to use with your children. It makes me feel good when I see the parents from Parent Corps because they form relationships now. It brings the families into the school, it gets them involved in their children's education, and this is something that goes beyond pre-K. This is something that should follow the children and the parents throughout their child's educational life.
We've been using the Parent Corps tactics and tricks in our classroom for 3 years, and we see it working in first grade now.
It teaches you a lot of things on how to become a better parent and also to help your child become a better individual.
I think Parent Corps is a good thing because it teaches how the parents should treat their kids and it teaches kids how to behave properly.
Can anybody tell me the rules for Friendsful?
Keep your hands to yourself.
That's right. Keep your hands, feet, and all objects to yourself. And can anyone tell me what happens if we break a rule? Nayeliss, I love the way you had your hand up. Can we please give Nayeliss a sticker for having her hand up?
Sure.
Break a rule.
You want to go to timeout.
All right, you go to timeout. Right, okay, let's sing our song. When you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. When you're happy and you know it, clap your hands.
Pearl, you just broke a house rule. Here's your timeout chair. We took her hand, we walked her over. Could you handle that?
Let's be real. After you go for a long day's work and you come home, you cook, you have dinner, you have your husband to take care of your other homework. I ain't doing all that. I'm not physically fighting with Justin to get him in the chair. The only how I'm getting Justin in the chair if I put crazy glue in the chair and stick his butt in there. I'm being real, Mashana. That is,
So this is perfect. Thank you for your honesty. When your child is struggling with you, that's a place where you would feel uncomfortable. Sometimes it can get tricky, and what we say in that situation is you would say to your child, you either go to timeout or you're not going to get to watch TV for an hour.
Parent Code teach me how to cope with children, how to cope with my own 2 kids, because I'm from the West Indies and we have a different skill down there, because back in the Caribbean, patients, we run out of it easy.
Yeah, people like to spank kids. They might scream at the kids. Here, we learn how we can just sit down and talk to the kids one-on-one, maybe give them time out. In the Caribbean, you don't know anything about giving time out.
I envision Parent Corps being in all our grades and all our schools throughout the country, because it's such a positive program and it's an empowering program, giving parents the tools that they need to help their children.
Great mad face during our lesson, and he shared so nicely with Quadir when he was playing blocks.
I definitely think there should be parent corps all over the country, because the things that they learned in pre-K and that the parents of the pre-K learned, I think it went beyond what was in the pre-K curriculum.
What I would tell other fathers who are out there is that they should get involved with a program like Parent Corps. So they'll have someone else who they can depend on who can help them with their situations.
She worked so well with Miss Ann to put together a puzzle and remembered to use her magic words and said,
Well, I go to everybody and tell them if they're a kid pre-K, I say, y'all got to get in Parent Corps, because Parent Corps is very helpful. A lot of times we're on a fast-moving pace, and I think Parent Corps is something that would help the younger parents and the grandmothers how to deal with our children better.
Thank you for your patience with the technological challenge, but I'm happy that you had a chance to hear from them. And now I'm going to talk very quickly, but I want to have a chance to show you some of the exciting findings that are coming out of our research. So with funding from the Institute for Education Sciences, the research arm of the U.S. Department of Education, we have carried out 2 major studies in Brooklyn, New York City, where we randomly assigned schools to get Parent Corps or pre-K education as usual. I'm going to show you some evidence from our current study taking place in school districts that have high school graduation rates of about 50%. This study took place in 10 elementary schools and included pre-K students who entered school in 2005 through 2008. 1,050 children participated, and we continue to follow these children throughout elementary school. Almost 90% of families agreed to participate in this study, so that really gives us a fantastic opportunity to look at impact on the entire school population. So we're going to start with a quick look into the classrooms. And this shows you 2 measures. One is of effective behavior management, and the other is of instructional productivity. And these are observations on a standardized rating scale. And the person that's doing the observation in these pre-K classrooms doesn't know if the school is getting Parent Corps or not. And what you see here is at the start of the program, they are equivalent. Well, I'm actually not showing that, but the levels of effective behavior management and classroom productivity are the same. And then after 1 year, 2 years, and 3 years of having the program in the school with support and training, the control schools stay the same, and if anything, they start to deteriorate a little bit, and we've seen this in other studies. What you see in the intervention classrooms is an increase in both effective behavior management and instructional productivity, so much that these are now reaching the level where we would call these high-quality experiences or high-quality programs. Now we'll take a quick look into the homes of these families. And these are 5 different kinds of measures of really important aspects of parenting, not only for educational outcomes, but also healthy development. And what we're showing here, the way to read this slide, is that if there were no differences between parent core schools and control schools, we would see no bars and we would have the effect at 0. So these are significant findings, and the size of the effects can be compared, for example, to the Nurse Family Partnership, a very well-known early childhood program that leads to long-term outcomes in terms of health, education, and other important life aspects. So now I'm going to quickly go to our achievement findings, and this is really where we think that the investment it should be made. And so here we have kindergarten reading and math and writing test scores by standardized testers who also don't know if these are kids who are in a parent core school or not. They don't know if the parents participated in the program or not. And then you have teacher ratings of academic performance and academic problems. And the size of these effects can be compared to the Success for All program, which is a school-wide initiative, and also an average of the effects from the well-known model early childhood high-quality programs. Just a little bit about what's going on here. We see this effect on reading achievement, for example, for all students, and these are kids who are coming in to school with high school readiness test scores, also low school readiness test scores. This is for children who are have low levels of self-regulation as well as adequate levels. And then what we see in the second bar is by the 4th year of having parent core in the school, we have an increase in levels of reading achievement, and we think that's because of the practice and the differences in the classroom settings. The third bar is for those students whose families participated in the program, and in this study that was about 60% of this very high need population, which is pretty incredible. And the changes that we're seeing on some aspects of parenting are clearly related to parents coming. But there are other aspects that are changing that are also related to having the teachers trained and reaching out to families and engaging them. And then the final bar is where we think we're headed in terms of this is for students whose families participated in the program and in the 4th year that the intervention is in the school. And I'm just showing you the line for the black-white achievement gap so you can have some context for that finding. So I'm getting the please wrap up sign, and so I will just summarize to say that these are our findings on academic achievement. We also have really compelling findings on obesity levels, showing very impressive differences on obesity as well as mental health outcomes. And so we think that our data are showing us that an investment in parents as well as teachers in the early childhood period can lead to a great return on investment for all of us. Thank you.